To JWL Sports, where we review all the best sports clips from around the world. Now you're probably wondering, why should I watch over here instead of any of the other channels? And that's because over there, they don't care about what you have to say. They say this all the time, they talk down to us, they think we're just a bunch of clowns on YouTube, Twitter. But I think it's the opposite. I think we know exactly what we're talking about. So I read every single comment. So if you think what I'm saying is the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard, let me know in the comments below. If you think what I'm saying is the most amazing thing, then definitely please let me know. Either way, let's get into some discussions, let's get into some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and it's turning into something truly, truly special. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of, and I think we're well on our way to doing it. So without further ado, let's get to it. We're watching a clip of The Herd with Colin Cowherd, doing an interview with Greg Olsen, giving a preview to the Super Bowl and what's to come. Honestly, there's not a whole lot to say right at the top before we kind of get into the interview and see what Olsen has to say. My prediction is that he'll probably play both sides. I don't think he's going to make any, specific predictions necessarily, but I'm definitely curious to see kind of what his inside perspective has to do with all this. So let's just jump right into it and see what he has to say.
Pro Bowler, 14 years. This is something I talked about earlier, that it's a lot of psychology, but, Andy Reid, he's got the bag, he's got the legacy, he's got the quarterback, and we're getting to a point. I hear it with Lamar Jackson, though I don't buy the narrative. Lamar's never going to win the Super Bowl. I'm like, settle down. Kyle and Lamar are both going to end up doing very well in their careers. But it is interesting. When you go into a game, Greg, and you're going up against Mahomes, I've watched coaches go for it on fourth downs they shouldn't, make decisions they shouldn't do. I feel like there's a Mahomes effect in these big games. Now, it may not exist this year, but what do you make of that? Going into a game with Brock, facing the greatest quarterback, can that get into your head, do you think?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think the reality is I think that's the case for a lot of teams, right? I think you go back to the NFC Championship game that we called. The reason Dan Campbell made those decisions to go on fourth down is because he's chasing 30-plus points, right? He knows this San Francisco offense is better than his Detroit defense, and he knows if they end with a field goal or a punt, they're not going to get to 30, right? So they got 31 and they lost. So the same thing with Mahomes, but that was true in years past. I think now, though, and I just listened to your prediction.
I disagree with that. He wasn't chasing 30. That's what you were saying, Greg Olsen. I remember that very vividly, but that was just Dan Campbell. And I already broke down his decision-making and how I disagreed with it in the first place, but he wasn't just chasing 30. He was just being very aggressive and just hates the fact of punting away or kicking a field goal on fourth down. And he was just, trying to live and die by the sword in that regard. He wasn't looking at the numbers and said, we have to score 30 points. That's your only chance at winning. That's not what he was doing at all, especially considering their offense really wasn't doing anything. And it was by him going for it on fourth downs and failing is what got that offense back into the game. So I just disagree with that completely.
And I think you're spot on about Kansas City. This is a defensive story for Kansas City. I mean, they scored 17 points in the AFC Championship and moved on to the Super Bowl. 3-4 years ago, if Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid scored 17 points, their season would have been over, right? So Steve Spagnuolo, this young defense, they're aggressive. You mentioned Chris Jones, but they got some dudes on the back end that they invested in last year that were rookies on that Super Bowl run. So this is a unique animal. So I don't think you have to be careful. I don't think you can play this like it's the Kansas City offense of years ago where you're chasing 30 points. That's not who they've been this year. I think your low 20s score is, I think that's right. So I don't think Kyle has to go crazy. I don't think Purdy needs to throw the ball 50 times. Run the ball at him. Be physical. That play under center. Play action pass. Get back to that's the fundamental philosophy of this Shanahan offense and what's made it so good. And I think this style of game with Kansas City's offense not being that highly prolific, high scoring that they've been in years past doesn't make you play out of character.
Well, and that's the thing that I'll say is that I don't think that Shanahan is going to call this game or game plan for this game with the idea of we're afraid that Patrick Mahomes is going to light us up. Like, not to say that he's not aware of that possibility or that they can't put up a lot of points, but he's not going with this mentality of, I'm going to try to change the game plan. We have to do everything we can to keep the ball away from Patrick Mahomes. Like, I think they're going to rely heavily on the ground game. I don't think they're going to hide Purdy, but I think if Shanahan is smart, he's not going to put Purdy in these 50-50 situations, because if Mahomes throws up a 50-50 ball and it gets intercepted, that isn't going to derail Mahomes. Mahomes has been there. He's been there many times. He has that resilience. Now, Brock Purdy has shown a lot of resilience without a doubt, but we're now talking in the Super Bowl, right? You don't want to set Purdy up to throw an interception in the first quarter, because that just now makes everyone uncomfortable, including Brock Purdy, but also other players as well, so you're going to want to minimize that. So I predict you're going to lean a lot on McCaffrey, especially in the beginning, a lot of these short yardage plays. And again, not to say that you're not going to throw the ball downfield, because you are going to show KC that you can do that, but it's not going to be this design of this like, oh my God, we got to force this, we got to put up touchdowns left and right, we got to do it. I'm just not going to see that level of urgency, because as Olsen just said, like they scored 17 points in the AFC Championship game, and again, it was a different game with different teams. The weather was different as well, so that has to be in consideration. But at the same time, I just don't think that there's that same level of angst with regards to KC's offense.
Every offensive coach, I think, has a bit of an advantage off a bye or extra time. But Andy's record off a bye is like historically insane. And I think some of it, in my opinion, comes because Shanahan's offense, there's a lot of repetition. It's the same play in 12 sets, but it's about a half dozen plays that keep going and going. So my argument would be, well, is time as big an advantage? With Andy, he'll bring in trick plays. He'll design new stuff. I mean, he's really an artist at this stuff. I mean, he literally will bring things into this game, and you're like, I mean, last year he's got Sky Moore wide open for touchdowns. I do think Andy does feel different off a bye. That's my take, is that he's not just another offensive coach. I think he's the best coach with extra time I've ever seen in my life. What is your observation of Andy?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think, listen, to weather what Kansas City has been able to do over the last couple of years is they recognized, okay, we need to look at how we're going to build this team, and we need to get some young assets. We're paying our quarterback $1 bazillion, and he's going to have to do with less, right? That's just the nature of today's NFL. If you're paying your $50+ million quarterback, you can build on this young defense, and you can weather those young teams. And when you look at last year, if you don't have Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, or the equivalent of, you're not winning the Super Bowl, you're not getting to the Super Bowl, let alone winning it, with a million young rookies and young defensive backs where you're starting three, first and second year guys in the back end, and all of a sudden you find yourself in the Super Bowl, and what was supposed to be a rebuild year, you're Super Bowl champions. You're only doing that if you are elite at the two spots that matter the most in pro football, head coach and quarterback. And you can make the argument, I mean, since Brady and Belichick, this is the best combination that we've seen. I mean, ever is a strong word, but in recent memory at least. And, I think you're right. I think certain coaches, the bye week, I think they're
definitely the best quarterback coach duo ever. And it's not even close. There's not even a close second. I wouldn't even say Belichick and Brady, mainly because Belichick is on the defensive side of the ball. So I think it's a little different. Obviously, Belichick and Brady worked well to balance each other out. But in terms of the magic that can happen with, an offensive head coach and the quarterback, that peak level of offense of what you can do, so is with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And I don't even think it's really a close second, honestly.
Is an advantage which both of these guys have is they know what the Super Bowl prep looks like. They know how much work should be done at home before they fly out to the Super Bowl site and get into the rigmarole. So I think from an advantage standpoint, I think Andy obviously has been there a bunch. So has Kyle. So I think the prep going into a Super Bowl is unlike anything else the rest of the season. The bye week point, though, you're right. Andy's bye week record, I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's something ridiculous. And that's not by accident.
Okay, as a great tight end, we have two Hall of Fame level tight ends. Some similarities, both willing to block. Kittle is kind of a junkyard dog to me. He's just banging around and loves contact. Kelce's a little bit more clever at times, but again, a willing blocker. When you look at them, if I'd never seen them play, let's start with Travis Kelce. And I'd say, hey, Greg, give me a rundown. I'm a defensive coordinator. What am I going to see with Travis Kelce?
Well, you're going to see a guy that regardless of what routes you had the scout team run all week and regardless of which guy wore the 87 jersey and you pointed him out in every formation and you knew on every third down where the ball was going to go, that route he's going to run on Sunday is not going to look like it looked in the week of practice. And
Right.
I think that's the beauty and the magic is his feel, his creativity, his ability to just play free and understand, okay, I know where the rest of my teammates are going to be. I know the general area of where Pat wants me to be. But for the quarterback and the receiver to not have to do it, we always say we don't run routes like it's on a piece of paper. Right? You don't just run 12 yards and break out and hope I'm open. No, you get yourself open in the NFL. You're not reliant on always the play call. It's not always the perfect route against the perfect coverage. That sums up Travis Kelce maybe better than any tight end in history in the NFL. I mean, his ability to be creative and find space in man and zone, create separation in man, and then a quarterback that trusts him, a play caller in Andy Reid that trusts him to have that flexibility. You got to earn that over a long time of being productive. And, I never thought anyone would catch Tony. If Travis plays long enough, he could catch Gonzalez, which years ago seemed unheard of. So it's pretty remarkable. Edelman's coming in to say what's up. And, so it's pretty remarkable what he's been able to do. And I think he's the perfect player in the perfect system, and that's where the magic happens.
So Kittle's different. He was a mid-round guy. Kelce wasn't a first-round guy either, but I think Kittle kind of surprised people. His physicality, there's a little Gronk to him, I think. What do you see?
Yeah, I think what's cool about Kittle is, he bust onto the scene a few years back, and I think him and Kelce were going back and forth maybe, and one of them was beating the other for like the most yards and ever. I want to say Kittle finished like 1,300 yards. And then these last couple years, he wasn't getting necessarily the big production, wasn't a 1,000-yard receiver. But, man, when you watch the tape, you talk about a perfect fit and a perfect offense. If you want to play tight end in Shanahan's offense, you're not just coming on the field to catch third down passes, come in the red zone, run fun. You're cut blocking defensive ends on the backside of zone. You're pass protecting on the deep shots to Debo and Ayuk. You're doing all the dirty work, and then you're also going to be counted on to go for 80, 90 a game. And then,
well, and that's the thing, because, I just looked this up. Kittle literally has more yards than Kelce on like a third of the receptions. Or a third less in the receptions. It's like 65 to like 90 or something, 90 some. And so it's like it's what Kelce has been able to do, or what Kittle has been able to do with the amount of production for the amount of receptions he has is insane. And in terms of like the question of who's going to have a bigger game, that's a harder question because the Chiefs rely obviously on Kelce. Patrick Mahomes relies on Kelce so much more. Kelce's really the only person on offense that both Reid and Mahomes have unquestionable confidence in, right? That is like absolutely, and you saw that in the game against can't think of their name right now, the Baltimore Ravens. You could see that they obviously heavily relied on Travis Kelce. There's no question about that. It's not to say that he doesn't have any trust in the other people, Rice or whatever, or Pacheco, but like it's obviously Kelce is his ultimate, target, and rightfully so. And Kittle doesn't necessarily have that relationship per se with Brock Purdy because he doesn't need to, because Brock Purdy has Debo and Christian McCaffrey and Ayuk. He's got all these other weapons that he can rely on. So if you had to say who's going to have a bigger game, you would probably have to say Kelce, just for the sheer fact that they're going to have to rely on Kelce in the Super Bowl. But with that said, it doesn't mean that, that just means that Kittle's, incapable of having a big game or that Kelce is just so much better. Kittle has been the better receiver this season, or the better tight end this season, without a doubt. Even Kelce has said it. Kelce has admitted that. We know Kelce's pretty darn cocky, right? So if he really believes that he was the best tight end in the NFL right now, he would say, I'm still the best. You got to get through me. He's made statements like that before, and this time he has not. He said, it's Kelce right now. It's Kittle right now. And it is. That is the reality. If you just look at the basic stats, you can see that. And again, I don't love looking at stats as just like this number is more than this number, therefore that guy's better. It's a little bit more complicated than that from my viewpoint. But when you do see the production that he had on significantly less receptions, it's very impressive. Very, very impressive. And I think the 49ers are really, really hungry. I think Kittle is really, really hungry. And I think Kittle knows that this is near the end. He's already lost in a Super Bowl. He knows what it's like, what it feels like. He's motivated. He's excited. He's ready to go. And he knows that this is going to be his best chance at winning a Super Bowl. So I think Kittle is just going to do whatever needs to be. He's going to be so focused. Even if he only touches the ball 3 times in the game, he's going to be so hyper-focused on all of the little things like Olsen's kind of talking about. But I think it's going to be even more than that. I mean, he's just going to be so locked in. Because you could only get to a Super Bowl so many times. And Kittle is definitely near the end of his career, relatively speaking. Not saying he's going to be retiring tomorrow, but it's near the end. He knows how hard it is to get here. He knows he just can't get to the Super Bowl year after year after year. So I think he's seeing this as, this is the year. This is the year. Let's go. And I think Shanahan will also rely on him heavily as well. I think a lot of these true seasoned vets, the ones who have really shown to be able to step up in these big moments, in these big games, they're going to rely heavily on them. McCaffrey, Debo, Kittle. I think those are going to really be the main targets. And then, of course, you'll fill it in with Ayuk and a couple of other people. But it's really going to be these guys that you know can handle the moment, that you know can come up big. And if they don't, if you lose, and it's because of those guys, that's something that you can go to sleep at night knowing, right? If Christian McCaffrey just can't break through, if Kittle just can't bring in some catches, you're okay with that. You're just like, we got the ball to our playmakers. We got the ball to the dudes who have led us for years. And if they can't get the job done, then again, at least you can sleep at night knowing that you got the ball to those guys. That's the way I see it, honestly. But this game is going to be so fascinating. I'm so excited. I could see this game going so many different ways. Honestly, I could see this being such a close nail-biter game. I could see KC running up the score. Or I could see, for the 49ers just shocking everyone and Brock Purdy just unloading. Especially now that we've all kind of seen what he can do with his legs. Like, they may really lean on that to keep them honest, to keep the Kansas City Chiefs honest, which now that's like, I don't know how KC's defense kind of planned against Brock Purdy at this point now, because they're just kind of like, well, wait a second, like, is he going to run on us or is he not, or what's going to happen? And to me, it's so fascinating. And so that game against the Lions, I think, opened up a lot of possibilities and have made Kansas City's job more difficult. But of course, you got Patrick Mahomes, and even though their offense hasn't been the most prolific this season, nowhere is it written in the stars that Patrick Mahomes can't just unload against the 49ers. And the 49ers defense hasn't necessarily been their strongest point. So anyone who believes that they can predict how this game is going to go, they're delusional, or they're just straight up lying, because there's just no way. Seriously, there's just no prediction. Obviously, you listen to enough people, someone's going to predict it right? But if you keep rolling a dice and you say it's going to land on 6, like, if you roll it enough times, it's eventually going to roll on 6, so you'll eventually be right. But that's why I'm really excited for this game, because I just think it's a giant question mark. I have no idea what to expect, and I just truly can't wait. But what do you all think? Who do you got? Kittle versus Kelce? Do you think Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are, with the extra time, they're just going to be able to really scheme against the 49ers and it's going to be too much for them? Do you think Brock Purdy is him and is going to be really able to step up into the Super Bowl and really show out against the Chiefs? Let me know in the comments below. Please don't forget to subscribe. As I said, we are building an amazing community here, and I truly would love to see you part of it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really helps with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.